Are you worried about protecting your legal rights in an uncertain world? How do current events affect the law and you? This is Law Talk Live with your hosts, Chris Dysart and Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS.
And welcome to Law Talk Live with Chris Dysart and co-host Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm just back from taking my son, Adam, who just turned 4 years old, to the football game. We stayed for the first half of the Rams game.
You know, that's really impressive that he got through one whole half of a game.
Yeah.
And so you have twin boys, though, right?
I do, Adam and Andrew.
And so do you trade off taking your children? Because you also have a daughter, right?
Yes. Well, my daughter came up with this plan, and the plan was to start. I've already taken my daughter to a game, and her plan from then was take the youngest ones first, and then I was going to take Andrew, but he decided he did not want to go. He wanted to hang out with Mom.
Okay.
So I took Adam. So anyway, he had a good time. He mostly ate popcorn, drank soda, and poked my brother in the arm.
Oh, sounds like what I would do.
Right.
I would probably have an adult beverage, have popcorn, I'd people watch, and maybe watch a little bit of the game.
Yeah, it was a good game. It looks like the Rams are going to win.
Yeah.
But anyway, today we are going to be talking about residents of nursing homes and their families and the fact that they should not be subjected to neglect or abuse. Now, that's not a controversial statement. I think we can all agree, and I think you would agree, Kelly, that families of nursing home residents and nursing home residents should not be neglected or abused, and yet the fact is it happens.
Right. You know, we were talking about this before we went on the air, and there are a lot of great nursing homes, or if you want to call them nursing homes, retirement homes, whatever terminology you want to use. There are a lot of great ones out there, and there are a lot of not so good ones.
That's right. So, the real question is, how do you know the difference? And so we're going to be talking about that on today's show, how to know the difference and how to find a good nursing home or move your loved one into a good nursing home if it ends up that they're in a bad nursing home. But first, I want to share with everyone a few stories that I read on the Internet, which is a fountain of knowledge, about some people that had some bad experiences in nursing homes. And the first one I want to talk about is from the FBI files. Now, Kelly, you know I'm a former federal prosecutor, and I used to prosecute white-collar crime. And some of the cases we used to prosecute involved nursing homes and involved some nursing home operators that got into the nursing home business for the wrong reasons. And those wrong reasons are trying to make money, which is a good thing to do, but they shouldn't only be interested in making money at the expense of their residents or patients. And there was one case at the Clay West nursing home near St. Louis, which was indicted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And there a woman was found with ants crawling all over her body, and she was left to lie in her own feces, and she was suffering from bed sores and malnutrition, and she was not the only one. There was other people that were found to have suffered from beatings from staff and neglect, all because the management that ran that nursing home was interested in making money, and they had cut costs, even though they were being paid a lot of money by Medicare. But the managers were making a lot of money. So that's one instance where management was in the nursing home business for the wrong reason.
Now, let me ask you about that. In that instance, so often you have to be your loved one's advocate. And I know every case is different, but how did someone not know that this was happening with her?
Well, when you put somebody in a nursing home, you're placing a lot of trust in the nursing home.
Right.
That nursing home has an obligation to do the right thing. And so if you're not there, maybe even on a daily basis, you might not know what was going on. Now, obviously, you want to try to check up on your loved one when you put him in a nursing home.
Right.
But you don't want to feel guilty if you can't be there all the time.
Right. And unfortunately, some people don't. They may have a son or daughter who don't even live in town.
Right, and sometimes people get put in nursing homes and their family members, they don't even have a family member that checks up on them.
Right.
So they may be left at the mercy of the nursing home. So they're totally reliant on the nursing home. And I want to read a story. There was another story out of the Associated Press this week about a nursing home in Lebanon, Illinois, which took a man who was in the nursing home who failed to submit to a test where they were going to check to see if he had a criminal record, which they have a right to do. But when he refused to submit to that check, I think they wanted to do a fingerprint check on him. Mm-hmm. They loaded him in a truck. They loaded all of his belongings, and they took him to a Denny's at a truck stop, and they dropped him off at the Denny's truck stop. And then that's kind of bizarre, don't you think?
Okay, so this was a man who wanted to go to a nursing home.
Yeah, he was already in the nursing home.
He was already there.
Right.
Okay.
And so the nursing home has a duty, I guess, to the other residents to check and see if this person has a criminal background so he doesn't go around abusing or attacking the other people. But the way they handled it when he refused to submit to a test, and this is a guy who had strokes before, so he wasn't necessarily altogether there. So they decided the way they were going to handle the problem was loading him in a truck, taking him to a Denny's at a Flying J truck stop, and dropping him off in a wheelchair and saying, "We'll see you later." And so then I guess the people at the Denny's called the police, and the police took him back to the nursing home. And he's at the nursing home again, and the nursing home is now in trouble with the Illinois Department of Public Health.
Now, and that's another question. Does he have a loved one? And I would not want to take my loved one back to that nursing home because you just don't know what's going to happen to him.
Right, yeah.
Boy, that's scary.
Yeah, that's a scary situation.
Yeah. You know, there are millions of baby boomers out there. You know, the baby boomer was 49 to 67, I think.
Right.
That's the age group.
Yeah.
And I think, this show is so important to have a show like this because there are so many baby boomers who, A, have loved ones who are at that age who will need extra help.
Right.
Or baby boomers who will need to start planning for their future. And so there are so many ramifications when it comes to law, which is, your expertise in something like this.
Right.
But it's just really amazing to me what you have to be on your P's and Q's when it comes to stuff like this.
Right. You have to be, if you can, you want to check up on the nursing home before you go in, and we're going to be talking about that later in the show. Mm-hmm. And then you also want to check on your family member periodically to make sure that they're getting proper care. And we're going to talk later on about the signs you should be looking for neglect or abuse to make sure that they're being treated well. But before we get into that, we're going to, later on in the show, we're going to meet with a man named Glenn Mollette, who is the author of a book appropriately with the title Nursing Home Nightmares, about the terrible experiences that he had with his wife who had multiple sclerosis. So she went into the nursing home at, I think it was age 47, and he's going to tell us about all the terrible things that happened to his wife there. And then he's also going to talk about how he solved the problem by moving her out, and he found another nursing home after a lot of hard work, asking around to different friends and going and meeting with the nursing home staff. There was actually a much better place for his wife to be, but in the meantime, she had a rough go.
You've got to do your homework.
Right.
My family was in the same situation where you have to visit each place. You just can't go off the internet and, figure out if it's, that looks really good. You have to go there. You have to go at different times of the day before you even consider putting your loved one in
the sneak attack, right?
Exactly. Just go in there when they don't know you're coming in and talk to the people and do your research because you don't want to put your loved one, even for a day, in a place that is not a good place. And, there are regulations and everything that nursing homes have going on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. A nursing home industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries. There's some nursing homes are federal that get Medicare. They're federally regulated, and almost all other nursing homes that get Medicare or Medicaid have state regulations that apply. So these regulations are very strict, and they should be followed, and that gives patients and their family members a great deal of rights that they can enforce with the nursing home, but they have to try to develop a good relationship with the nursing home staff and stay on top of them if they're able to make sure that bad things don't happen to their loved ones.
Right. Well, even if it is, even under those regulations, there's still a lot of bad stories out there.
Oh, right.
Right. Yeah. Hey, if you guys want to call in too. We'd love to hear from you. Chris can offer his expertise in law. And,
right. I've represented many people in nursing home cases. And if you have a nursing home horror story to share or a good nursing home experience, please call us at 314-453-5877 with your story.
We'd love to hear from you.
Now, when we come back, as I said, we're going to meet with Glenn Mollette, the author of Nursing Home Nightmares. This is Law Talk Live with Chris Dysart and co-host Kelly Jackson with the Big 550 KTRS.
Law Talk Live continues. Here are your hosts, Chris Dysart and Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS.
Welcome back. You're listening to Law Talk Live with Chris Dysart and co-host Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS. And we're discussing how to protect yourself and a loved one that needs to move into a nursing home or already lives in a nursing home. If you have any questions or have a story to share, please call us at 314-453-5877. Next, we're going to speak to a man named Glenn Mollette, the author of a book called Nursing Home Nightmares. Welcome, Glenn. Are you there?
Hey, Chris. I'm here. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hi, Glenn.
Hi. How you doing?
That's fine.
That's my co-host, Kelly. Glenn, let me ask you first, what caused you to write a book named Nursing Home Nightmares?
Chris, let me just say that, first of all, even talking about the book and the whole subject of what we're going to discuss is still painful. My wife passed away about 11 years ago, but she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in about 1989. Actually, it was about 1990. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. We went through the 12-year journey, fighting the disease, going to every doctor possible, multiple hospitals, trying all different kinds of new therapies, injections, procedures, you name it, trying to literally save her life. But we watched her debilitate from being a very healthy, active school teacher, professional woman, to pretty much the walker, wheelchair, and she got to the point the last 3 or 4 years of her life where she couldn't feed herself, couldn't brush her teeth, put her makeup on, take herself to the restroom, absolutely had no ability whatsoever to care for herself. And so toward the last couple of years of her life, after her 2 sons and I did everything that we possibly could to care for her, with me being a working parent, trying to care for 2 boys, they trying to assist me in caring for her. We eventually turned to a nursing home where we put her where she was for 6 months. Go ahead.
So you put her in the nursing home, and I guess for a while did it seem like everything was going okay, or what was your first sign that things weren't what you wanted them to be?
Well, she was unhappy being in the nursing home because we started learning that she wasn't able to feed herself, so oftentimes they would set a tray in front of her and walk off and wouldn't feed her. We would hear stories about that. She would tell me about that. She was supposed to get a bath every day. She was lucky to get 3 baths during the week. This is a lady that is used to getting up and dressing herself and going off to work, and so they weren't dressing her, changing her clothes every day the way that we hoped that they would. Just being not getting therapy. She was promised to get physical therapy Monday through Friday, and she was lucky to get the physical therapy 2 or 3 times a week, and usually it was just very minuscule, not much challenge to it whatsoever, pretty much going through the motions so that they could bill Medicaid for the services. She developed a fever while she was in the nursing home, which led us to suspect, of course, that there was an infection going on, and there wasn't a doctor trying to diagnose what was causing the fever. A doctor was coming in about once a month. They would breeze in for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, get their monthly payment from Medicaid for showing up at the nursing home room. And so the list just sort of goes on.
Yeah, when I read your book, it was a very moving book. It was really a horrific experience that your wife went through and you went through with her. And I was struck by the situation your wife was in at night when she got this fever and she couldn't take care of herself. Can you tell us about what her nights were like when she had that fever?
Well, just a little bit. I did have one CNA told me one time. She said, "Glenn, I have 60 people that I have to care for. There's no way that I'm probably going to be able to turn your wife over, tonight." So there was just a lack of staff to care for the number of people that this great corporate-owned nursing home had, but there just wasn't enough staff to care for them. And then a lot of nights, a nurse would come in that would cover her up. Oftentimes she'd be running a fever. They would set the thermostat on 73 or 74 degrees to keep everybody, in the nursing home warm. And a lot of times she would, wake up sweating. There wasn't anybody to give her a drink of water. There wasn't anybody to pull the bed covers back. And so, it was just, it was a very uncomfortable experience.
Glenn, first of all, I'm so sorry about the loss of your wife. Let me ask you, when you first admitted her into the nursing home, I'm sure, like any place that you put a loved one, and they were all rosy and happy and many promises. And what did they tell you, and what made you, want to admit her to this place? And what was the disconnect?
Well, it's a wilderness experience for anyone who has never gone through the journey of placing a loved one in a nursing home. It is a wilderness experience. Mm-hmm. You trust the nursing home. You really don't know what you're getting into. You're already under a tremendous amount of physical and emotional stress because you've been caring for this person for a long period of time, and so you're looking for some help in caring for them. And, everything was very rosy. We felt like, okay, it was a good-looking nursing home. It was a newer facility. So, that was appealing to us. The staff was friendly. And then, absolutely things just began to deteriorate as I began to ask questions, as I began to be concerned, as, I started, being displeased with some of the things that I saw going on, asking about why, she wasn't being bathed every day, why she didn't receive the physical therapy. And just, the more questions you ask and the more involved you get in what's going on in the nursing home, the less comfortable they seem to be, in dealing with you. So getting involved, asking questions, being there, showing up a lot of times, sometimes makes them nervous.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you would think would be the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, it turned out that kind of ended up in an adversarial type situation for you.
Yeah, it really did, and it just continued to get worse as I began to, continue to ask questions. I never really made demands, but I probably came across as demanding to them. Your Medicaid at that point, she was on Medicaid, was paying them probably something like $4,600 a month. I think it's like $6,000 a month now, or somewhere in that ballpark. But they're receiving their monthly payment. It's my money as much as it is anybody else's. It's going to them, or in that case, my wife's money. And so you expect a level of care for the income that they're receiving, but they sort of want to portray themselves as being in the driver's seat. They, can be very intimidating if you don't have a nursing background or a nursing home background. Sometimes you kind of feel like, you're the novice person, and you are, because you're just learning the steps of, dealing with a nursing home situation, and so it can be a very intimidating situation.
Yeah, Glenn, I noticed in reading your book that it seemed like the nursing home staff for that first nursing home your wife was in tried to make it seem like you didn't have the right to ask these questions, and you didn't have the right to take your wife out, to take her to your house to meet with your sons, or that you were just kind of at their mercy. And
I was pretty much at their mercy and felt like, it was just problematic every time I wanted to do it. It was kind of like I was, asking too much of them. I think, for example, on Christmas Eve, I wanted my wife to be home, with her family, and, the big deal was I had to have her back, by like 11:30 that night, because if she wasn't there at midnight, they weren't going to receive their Medicaid payment that night. And then so I had to, get her back, and then, I got up the next morning because my boys, of course, wanted to spend Christmas with their mother. We wanted her at home, tried to show up back there at 8 o'clock in the morning to check her back out. And it was really asking a lot of them because, the nursing home staff had to get her dressed or help me get her dressed, to check her out of the nursing home that day. And so, I was just a lot of trouble. If it's an elderly person and they don't have very many family members, or the family members aren't able to really be involved, it's a much easier care situation for the nursing home because oftentimes they're not being asked a whole lot. We were a young family.
How old was your wife at the time?
Pardon?
How old was your wife at the time?
She passed away when she was 49, so at that time she was about not quite 48 years old.
Now, Glenn, I know the situation at this nursing home got really bad at one point. Did they try to actually prosecute you for bringing...
Well, what happened was she was running this fever, and it had been going on for a long period of time, which obviously there was some kind of major infection going on. And so I knew from being a caregiver to her for the previous 10 years that Tylenol would help. And so, I gave my wife some Tylenol and told the head of the nursing department that I had given her some Tylenol. And she just really raised her eyebrows with a look of alarm and seemed to be very angry with me about that. And the next thing I knew, the next weekend, she had I think it was the assistant county prosecutor meeting with me and a number of the nursing home persons. And basically, I felt like they were going to try to put me in jail. And I had to take an attorney friend of mine with me. And luckily I did have a friend who is an attorney who went with me and represented me. And, Karen, my wife, came and sat, at the meeting in that situation. And,
So I'm unclear as to why that was a problem, you bringing Tylenol. What did they say the problem was?
We never really understood it. It was as though that I was trying to give her something that was going to hurt her. It's like I was out of line. They were the ones who were giving her medicine. They were the ones who were caring for her medically. It was like medically I was doing something wrong.
Now,
it might intervene. I think the statement was made that medicine might intervene with some of the other medicines that she was taking and could be deadly, maybe could be lethal. And I didn't understand how a Tylenol could be lethal when she was running a fever anyway, and they really didn't seem to care that she had this fever because they weren't doing anything about it.
Glenn, what I've seen nursing homes do, because you had made so many complaints to the nursing home up to that point, a lot of times what they'll try to do to protect themselves in case you end up suing them is create a situation in the residence file where it looks like the family members have done something wrong so that they can bring that up in the case down the road. And maybe that's why they were trying to document the record to make you look like a bad guy.
Trying to build a case possibly against him.
There's no question
Right.
They began the process of me being the bad guy, that I was the one that was, I wasn't a good caregiver. I mean, I cared for her for 10 years prior to her being in this nursing home. And so anyhow, this nursing home, she was in it for about 5.5 months. During the whole 12 years of her illness, it was the worst 5.5 months of the illness. It was the worst thing we did or I did during that whole process. It was definitely a nightmare from the get-go.
Now, eventually your wife developed what's called a bed sore.
During this whole process, she had this bed sore that developed that was causing the fever. When we brought her home from the nursing home and I began to have to care for her, she was telling me about this wound that she had on her backside. And I bandaged the wound and couldn't believe it. I could literally almost put my fist inside the wound. And during this whole time, the nursing home staff told me nothing about this wound and what was going on. And so this is where the tremendous infection was coming from. And when she got home from the nursing home, she literally spent one night in her house. And she had to go back to the hospital because there was a staph infection and the wound was so bad that she had to go to the hospital.
Now, this was a different hospital than the nursing home, right?
Oh yeah, it was a hospital,
Okay.
right, different from the nursing home. And when one of the nurses obviously had home health care that started up the day that she came home.
Hey, Glenn, we're gonna be going to break here for a second,
Gotcha.
So if you can just hold on.
Gotcha.
When we come back, we'll talk to you a little more. You're listening to Law Talk Live with Chris Dysart and co-host Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS.
Law Talk Live continues. Here are your hosts, Chris Dysart and Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS.
Welcome back. And today we're talking about how to protect yourself or a loved one that needs to move into a nursing home or already lives in a nursing home. And we're talking to Glenn Mollette, the author of a book called Nursing Home Nightmares, a book about the experiences that he and his not his ex-wife, but his former wife who's passed away, had at a nursing home. You still there, Glenn?
I'm still here.
Okay. When we were last talking, we were talking about your wife having developed a significant bed sore, and then she got sepsis. And so how did that end up? What kind of treatment did she need to have?
Well, she just just got home. I had to admit her into the hospital, which meant they put her in a specialized bed, Chris. She had to stay in this bed for literally 3 months.
Now, when you say a specialized bed, you mean a bed with like a specialized air mattress or something?
Exactly right. That's it. And they had to get her to the point where they could do the surgery. They had to do a surgery on this. They had to remove part of her tailbone.
Now, why did they have to remove part of her tailbone?
It had like a staph infection. There was like an infection at the end of her tailbone that had to come off.
So that infection must have been going on for quite some time to get into the bone.
Oh, no question about it. It had been going on probably for, I don't know. I don't know, but absolutely.
And what was the nursing home telling you about that?
They weren't telling me anything.
Admit to anything?
No, they didn't admit to anything. They didn't tell me about it. The doctor was coming to see her, I guess, every month, but wasn't doing anything about it.
Well, let me ask you about your decision to move. You moved her out of the nursing home, and I guess the time period you're talking about is after you already made the decision to move her out of the nursing home.
They finished the surgery on the pressure sore, and then I brought her back home.
Okay.
And my two sons and I, we cared for her for 12 out of 14 months. Her parents cared for her for 2 months. We cared for her for 12 out of the 14 months. It finally got to the point where, physically, emotionally, mentally, she just, needed 24-hour care. We had to find another nursing home. At this point, I had already written this book, Nursing Home Nightmares. You can imagine how hard it was for us to find another nursing home after I wrote this book.
So did you write this book because you were angry about what had happened to your wife?
I have to admit, yeah, absolutely. I was angry, and felt like that we'd really gotten, it was a bad deal. It was a very unhappy situation.
And you
you sort of shoot yourself in the foot then, because other nursing homes, when she's still alive, they won't respond, they won't help us to care for her, so you sort of shoot yourself in the foot. But we began looking for another one. We were turned down by numerous nursing homes. There was no way they were going to admit her. They weren't going to deal with us. They weren't going to deal with me at this point, because I sort of have a new attitude about nursing homes. But we did find somebody that would admit her and would take her, and they took excellent care of her.
So how did...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Kelly.
No, you were saying you were having a hard time. Is it because of the book that you were writing, or because of the care that was required?
Well, the care that was required, absolutely. She did require extremely acute care. But also, the book had come out. I had published the book. The book was out before her death, and after this first nursing home experience. And so, the book absolutely was very problematic in us finding another nursing home.
So what did you do to try to find a good nursing home after your bad experience with that first nursing home?
Started talking to people that I went to church with, started asking people, tell me some place that you know of. It's a good nursing home that might talk to us, that might help us. So started getting referrals, started asking questions of people in the community, found this place that actually was about 10 miles from our house. I went, sat down, talked to the administrator. I said, look, this is who I am. This is the book I've written. He said, I've heard about you. He said, we can help you. He said, we can help your wife. Her situation is nothing that we can't handle. She's welcome here, and we'll do everything that we can to work with you and take care of her. He immediately was a guy that had a great spirit and was, willing to work with us. The nursing staff was absolutely unbelievable. So I talked to other people about this nursing home facility, got nothing but good recommendations, talked to the nurses, toured the place, looked around. It looked good. It looked clean. It smelled clean. It seemed like the nursing staff was efficient, that they were very caring. And she spent probably about the last 2 months of her life there. She did die there, but they did everything they possibly could to, keep her clean, change her clothes, feed her, take care of her, and actually she was happy being there. The other place, she never had a happy day, but at the last place where we were, the last 2 months of her life, she was actually happy being there.
So I guess there's a lesson there that not all nursing homes are bad, and I don't even know what the percentages that are good or bad, but you can certainly find a good nursing home. That second experience you had was a good experience for you and your wife.
It was very positive to this day. That administrator and the nursing home staff from that nursing home, I consider them friends. I would recommend anybody to that nursing home.
Now, back to Law Talk Live with Chris Dysart and Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS.
Welcome back, and today we've been discussing how to protect yourself or a loved one that either needs to move into a nursing home or already is living in a nursing home. And so I just wanted to say a little bit, Kelly, about some of the things that people can look for. I think that our guest talked about things you can look for when you look at a nursing home, having sanitary-looking conditions,
Right.
staff that seems to be supportive. You want to try to develop a relationship with the staff, a good relationship from the very beginning. But if your loved one is already living in a nursing home, some red flags to look out for would be that they seem non-communicative or withdrawn, and they weren't like that before they went into the nursing home. Or the nursing home seems to have some kind of unsanitary conditions. For instance, that it seems to be dirtier than it should be, or there seems to be something wrong. And what people need to recognize under those circumstances is that they have a right, first of all, to question the nursing home staff about that, and that they also have a right to move their family member into a better nursing home, because there are better nursing homes out there.
And that's exactly what Glenn did. Unfortunately, his wife suffered a serious illness aside from what she already had.
Right.
But that's what he had to do. He saw the signs, and he said, "I'm getting her out of here."
Right.
Yeah. All right. As we wrap things up, I know we don't have much time, but Cardinals are playing right now in their third game, and a big story has been Jack Clark and the lawsuit that Albert Pujols has filed against him. Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting case where Albert Pujols is alleging that he was defamed by Jack Clark by the statements that he was juicing or using steroids. So I guess...
You think it'd be a hard case for him to win, Albert Pujols?
I do. It is a very hard case to win, and I'll tell you there's really two reasons why. First, he has to prove that the allegations against him are materially false, which I think he'll be able to prove. If you say that somebody's been juicing or using steroids and they haven't been, then those are obviously materially false statements. But you have to prove, and this is the really tricky part in any kind of case like this, that they were made with actual malice. In other words, that when Jack Clark made those statements, he knew that was not true, or he was so reckless with that. In other words, he didn't really have a legitimate basis to make those statements at all. In other words, being negligent or having heard a story from somebody and that person being wrong about it is really not going to be enough. So that's a pretty steep road to go up. It's not impossible, but it's pretty steep.
It's going to be interesting how the events unfold in that.
It will
case.
Be interesting.
Yes.
It will be interesting.
Another showdown, huh?
Yeah, that's right. So I want to thank everybody for joining us with Law Talk Live with Chris Dysart and Kelly Jackson on the Big 550 KTRS.
Any advice, legal or otherwise, given on the show is designed for general information purposes only and is not designed to provide listeners with specific personal legal advice. Anyone with a specific legal problem should always consult an attorney for professional legal advice.